people, rise up, sing loud, celebrate, and be proud. Ayo, today is for us indigenous people. Rise up, sing loud, celebrate, and be proud. Ayo, ayo.
Ignash Waniksha, Mariana Harvey, Washnash Yakama Kanik. I'm Mariana Harvey, I'm Yakama, and my parents are Ken and Patty Harvey, and my grandparents on my father's side are Emma Whitefoot and James Harvey. And on my mother's side, my grandparents are Erna and Wes Moline, and I am descended from, I'm a member of the Yakama Nation, and I'm a descendant from the Klickitat, Skinpa, and also a descendant of Spokane and Choctaw tribes. And on my mother's side, I am Swedish, and I live here on the Squaxin Territory in the southwestern part of Black Lake in Olympia, Washington. And I'm a mother, I'm an Itla.
And Piali, may wanotoka Itsa Shash, Ehekakoat, Ehekatkwikani. My name is Itsa Shash, and can I talk a little bit about my grandparents? So on my mother's side, my mother on my mother's side is British German from New York, and family's been in that area for quite some time. And then her father, my grandma's name, my grandmother's name was Dorothy de la Cruz on that side. My grandfather, Conrad de la Cruz, is from the Philippines, descended from Cebuano and Ifugao people in that area. On my father's side, my father's father was Roberto Ramirez, Chichimeca, Mexica people, Nawa people, and his mother on that side, my grandma, Delia Rivera, also from Texas, Tejana, and also from Warm Springs Apache and Nawa people in Chichimeca. My mother's name is Maria de la Cruz, and she was born in New York as well. And my father is Tomas Shash, from born in Texas also. And again, I'm Itza, and I was born on the East Coast, mostly raised out in Colorado, and now I live here with my family in Washington. This is our son, Ayut Chalchekutzpalin Shash.
So Itsa and I met a long time ago, back in college. He invited me to his birthday party, and that's how I met. He found me in the computer lab, jamming out some powwow music, and thought I better invite her to my party. And we just were acquaintances for a couple years, and I actually moved back home. We were in college in Colorado, and then when I moved back to Colorado, he was working with one of my really close friends with buffalo, and they were bringing buffalo to this like intertribal student community and learning how to harvest and tan hides and then feeding community. And right before their first feast, him and some of the people that were working together on that project invited me to come out for the weekend to brush out a buffalo hide. And so that's why I always say, like, it all started with brushing out one weekend brushing out a buffalo hide, because he that weekend was magical. We went over there, and one of my friends was making blue corn fry bread, and they were making buffalo sashimi and brushing out a buffalo hide, and just as Native students really learning how to reconnect to our Native foods and medicines and culture while being away from home, and really reclaiming a lot of our traditions, and that's really how we met and really connected. And we've been together 11 years now. And I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. So yes, I believe one of the reasons we're here to share is to share our journey as parents, our personal story, and as an Indigenous family, intertribal family. Just to talk about our journey through parenthood and some of our birth story, or Ayut's birth story, and just some of our experience, how we came to it. And so for me, I believe, as for many people, I was thinking about that, and I think when I think about when my parenting journey began, well, I guess it began before I was even born, because just the way we, as Indigenous people, we have to talk about where we come from, and in terms of our ancestors and everything. Everything is about our interrelationship with our community and it's my nation. So it's no different. No different with the parenting for me. I have to think about the context of my family, and I think about my parents, and for their generation, I feel a lot of what they were doing was reclaiming indigeneity for themselves and for their family and for all of us. And you know, my father, coming from, you know, Texas, Tejano, he was kind of one of the first people in his family. For a little bit. I love you so much. I want to play, but I'm going to talk for just a little while. So yeah, just you know, he was kind of one of that generation who kind of start looking at it and just reclaiming a lot of the ancestry. A lot of generation before him was very uncomfortable in calling themselves Native American, because, you know, it wasn't safe, or there was a lot of prejudice and just a lot of privileges that you would have if that wasn't what you claimed or could identify as anything else, really. So he was one of the first ones in his family to start reclaiming that, and part of that was led him to meet my mother, who was British German, and then also I think was attracted to the idea of indigeneity more through my grandpa's side. He fled the Philippines during World War II, and unlike a lot of Filipino families, he came over alone. Many people who are Filipino bring their whole families and everything when they come with them, and a lot of his family was killed in the war. And he came over and was basically just seeking to become American, and so left a lot of that behind as well. So I think my mother and my father really had that commonality when they came together, was kind of wanting to reconnect with indigeneity and being connected to the roots and their ancestors. My mother was very involved with birth work. She was a midwife, and that's what she did. And of course, when she was a midwife, most of that was very illegal, and so she connected with a lot of other people who were still in the underground movement, doing a lot of work to allow it to be legalized again. And really, she really approached it from kind of a spiritual place. Like everything my mom does is very kind of way of life. Like she never really separates a lot of those things. So for me, growing up in that context, I had a lot of ceremony in my life, and I was exposed to a lot of birth, and so I've heard a lot of people talking about birth as ceremony, which is absolutely true in the way that I understand it, and was really the only way I ever knew about it. And it was kind of interesting to me, really, when I found out other people didn't think about it that way. So that was the beginning of my parenting journey. I feel was just looking at birth as ceremony. Part of it also led, I think, to extended relations. Because of I ended up with a very big family, kind of complex family. My parents ended up separating. Their relationship wasn't the best for them together, and they both remarried and had more kids. And so, but they were also very good in the sense, I feel, that they didn't separate relations. They all got along well enough, to raise us all together. So I had like two mothers and two fathers growing up, and I'm one of 11 kids. And whenever you're in a family kind of that size with multiple fathers and mothers and children, it's kind of like that community feeling in some ways that people kind of talk about, about we all raised each other. And I feel a lot of that when I think about, being I'm the third eldest of the family, and some of my younger ones, I really got to experience them and can remember them being born and going through that ceremony and raising each other and developing relationships and caring for one another, and that really I feel was helpful. It's kind of funny. One of the things I relate it to is when we were getting ready to have Ayut, and which was a very conscious decision on our part. And one of the things I hear from people all the time was like, "It's gonna change your life. Everything's gonna be so different. You don't even know what's gonna hit you." And I won't say that it didn't change my life, because of course it did. It's any ceremony, but it gave me context to think about one of the differences, I think, that I went into it from some people, because it's kind of like I've been in ceremony big part of my life, this ceremony, and I think about other ceremonies that I was raised with, and people who don't have that as part of their life, and they'll come to ceremony, and you see that their life changes really big, you know, and so for me it was like, it was familiar, you know, it felt kind of like I'd been in this ceremony before, and so it wasn't brand new, but my seat in the ceremony was very different. My role in the ceremony was different. You know, I was my first time going in through this ceremony as the father, you know, and just looking at it from that way, and as an adult too, you know, because a lot of my experiences, I was still, you know, maybe just coming of age when I had a lot of those experiences, or very young, and it's just different when you return ceremonies as an adult with different perspectives, so yeah, that was that's kind of how I went into it, and it was very different. I think as we go into this part about the birth story, I want to allow Mariana, the mom, to be able to talk a little bit more about it, and then maybe I'll come in and speak some more. But I'm gonna switch off and hang out with my son for a little bit. Switch off, hang out with my son for a little bit, and talk to you soon. You come with me? You wanna come with Túta?
Maybe.
Maybe? You wanna sit there for a minute? You sit there for a minute, okay?
So I wanted to share just a tiny bit about how we, came to that decision to be parents. I think what I really value about our relationship and partnership is that we had a lot of time to just grow individually and grow, like give each other space to change. We met and started dating right before we were 23, and there's just so much that happens in that time span, and so I feel like that's really helped us as parents to take time to deeply get to know each other and show up the best way we can in this role as parents. And just in our relationships, when I first met Itsa, and as he shared, growing up with so much ceremony, which I didn't grow up with ceremony like that, and it was becoming a bigger part of my life, especially with Itsa. And that's just been such a important part of our partnership and how we've navigated our life together. And so I remember when he turned 30, he asked his family to come up here to Washington to hold ceremony. And I remember he had lots of things that he asked people to help for his prayer, what he wanted in his life, in our life. And I remember him praying about, when we're ready for that family and when we're ready to have a home, and there's just been so much on this journey where I realize that we're living that, we're living the blessings of those prayers that we asked for and that we asked our Creator and Spirit and our community and family and loved ones to pray for us and with us. And I'm just so grateful for that. And I think that's such a big part of my pregnancy and birth and parenthood journey, is just like how to really root there and how to really root in our prayers and our ceremonies, to really follow this path and this journey. When we decided to start trying to have this baby, it took a while, and what's wild about that was not even really wild, it's just real, is that so many women just don't even have a lot of tools of really knowing our bodies. Like, I really didn't know that we should be having sex while I'm ovulating. I just didn't know that. So we were just out there, and I think that that's so wild that it took an appointment with my naturopath to just be like, when are you ovulating? And I'm like, I don't know. And then boom, immediately got pregnant once I figured out when I was ovulating. But I even remember right before that, we were in ceremony, and my sister was really grieving, and Itsa's mom was like, we're here to pray for you and pray for what you need. And also, a grieving person's prayers is really powerful. If you're really close to Creator and your sister here is trying to have a baby, like maybe offer some prayers that way. And I also really felt like that opened it up too, because really, yeah, I immediately got pregnant right after that ceremony. And so here we are, pregnant. I'm pregnant. It's always a weird thing when people say we're pregnant. I go back and forth. I was pregnant. And I was totally influenced, of course, by Itsa's mom being a midwife. When I first started dating Itsa, I remember being in her kitchen, Maria's kitchen, and her talking about her journey as a midwife. And to be honest, I don't even know if I knew what a midwife does at that time. And, she was telling me about, the political work of midwifery, and this, like, going, to all these rural community places around where she lives and supporting women to have birth at home. And I remember her saying, the thing that I remembered when I was deciding whether to have a home birth was her talking about, just that, that sacredness of bringing this life into the world, and the hospital is just not the place for that. That there's so many, bright lights and interventions and all these things, and things that, like, when she was telling me, gosh, I don't know, probably like 10 years ago, like I didn't really understand it, and it was something that, like I listened to, and then I kind of tucked it away. But then when it became time to decide how we wanted to bring this baby into the world, of course, thinking about that, calling in those people in my life that do that type of work. And I remember, really fast, we chose that we wanted to have a home birth. And then I remember reaching out to my friend Cami Goldhammer, who does a lot of indigenous lactation consulting and just awesome birth work. And I was like, are there any indigenous midwives? Like, we considered, like, could Maria come out here and help me birth this baby? And because she lives in Colorado. And I remember Cami was like, this is probably the only name you need to know. It's probably the only person in your area, but Rhonda Grantham. And I was like, okay, and I just want to lift up, like, how amazing it was to have an indigenous midwife. I forgot to mention that I'm also Tagnapum, I'm Upper Cowlitz, and Rhonda's Cowlitz, and to have somebody, so Rhonda was my midwife, and to have an indigenous midwife, somebody from my own tribal community, and just I feel like I can do a whole long story of how amazing that care is and was to have from her. And the more I talked to other people, realizing how extremely special it was to have just culturally based care. I remember the first meeting that we had, she was like, who's going to be at your birth? How, like, what's your birth story going to be like? And what, like, what are your needs? And, what ceremonies do you want to bring in? And really checking on that throughout the whole pregnancy. And of course, I was pregnant for 2018, most of 2018. Our son was born in January 2019. And not long after I met Rhonda, she was hosting the Salish Sea Birth Keepers Gathering, where all these indigenous birth keepers came here and met, and it was so influential. Like, it's a big part of my pregnancy journey, because I met people who are just such rad, decolonial, like, amazing birth keepers. and just hearing people's birth stories, hearing the like challenges and dynamics of serving our rural tribal communities and all these birthing people. And it really influenced me of just like to continue to figure out how do we bring in our ceremonies, how do we bring in our culture into this pregnancy, into this birth. And what I found, you know, is of course there's teachings that I got along the way from our you know, tribal elders and people in the longhouse about how to kind of conduct yourself when you're pregnant. And I realized there's still just not a lot. Like there's just, and that doesn't mean that some families have some, and that's just what I was able to connect to when I was pregnant. And I was just so hungry for how do we birth our babies into the world by, you know, with the teachings of our ancestors. And some of the people that I met at that birth keepers gathering, you know, just shared different things. Of course, Rhonda shared different things. And I know that that's something Itsa wanted to talk about. It's just like a lot of, you know, his lineage of being Mexica and Nawa, you know, like how a lot of that birth knowledge wasn't broken, you know, that people are very much still taking care of that knowledge and making sure it's passed down. So yeah, I had a really positive experience in my pregnancy, and thinking about I think I wanted to just go back to that care that I got from Rhonda as my midwife. Of, you know, she would sit in my living room for an hour or 2 hours in kind of that regular rhythm that you see a pregnant person. And, you know, we do the like checking vitals, and then it was like, how are you? How is, you know, like, how are you feeling right now at this stage? What are you needing? And like going so in depth about every type of need that I might have as a pregnant person. And when I really think about later after having my birth, like, that wisdom of just really letting me lead. I hear so much in healthcare, you know, like people's power get taken away so easily. And that's often what you hear from people that birth in hospitals, is just that all the interventions that happen, and, you know, like why doulas are so important in those spaces to really advocate for the pregnant person. And I realized like so much of that care that I got was just really letting me lead my journey and trying to connect me to the resources and things that I needed. Yeah, the last thing I want to say about my pregnancy is just, I remember the last kind of meeting I had with Rhonda, and Rhonda also works with another midwife, Kara, and Sophie as a doula. And so she was like, we're going to have your whole birth team there. Like, whoever you're going to have at your birth, like, we're going to meet and we're going to talk about, you know, roles. And I just remember, like, realizing, like, during my birth and after my birth, like, how important that was. Like, I really felt what my needs were really centered, and I didn't realize how important that was until the end of that pregnancy journey, because I listened to so many birth story podcasts, and I felt like I always heard these scenarios of like, and then my mom came in and was trying to make me drink juice, and I didn't want any juice, or, you know, like, you know, and like, and I felt like I got just the boundary that I needed to birth my son. And so I went into labor on a couple days before. So I went into labor, I think it was like a Monday night, but it was early labor. So it was sort of like that, like, contractions, and I'm like, is this contractions? And then, you know, slowly realized that they were contractions. And then, you know, knowing enough about the process, I'm like, all right, I'll just call the midwife in the morning. I think, you know, this is really, we're in this early stage. and I was able to kind of sleep most of the night, but I woke up a lot. And then in the morning, I was able to kind of take a short walk in our cul-de-sac, and then they started to get more intense. And they were still, I think, about 20 minutes apart. And that's, we called a midwife. Itsa called in, you know, to not go to work and just let our families know. And but they were still staying pretty consistently 20 minutes apart. And then that second night, Tuesday night, I barely slept. You know, I mean, I think they were like getting to be 10 minutes apart. And so by the time it was Tuesday morning, Rhonda was coming and was really concerned about, you know, like, I mean, this is something she told me later. She let me ride my wave of just like, everything's going great. Birthing journey is on its way. But I remember her like being like afterwards, like, it's so hard when there's that third day, when that pregnant, you know, birthing person wakes up the third day without rest. And so she brought a TENS unit and put it on my back, and that allowed me to rest for a little bit and really gain some energy. And then my water broke with that on. And that by that time she had already called the acupuncturist that I was seeing in my pregnancy. Rhonda, I remember mentioning, you know, that she really likes when there's, if the pregnant person is interested, to establish care with this acupuncturist, because she can be really amazing if she's needed at birth. And I was like, okay, you know, not really knowing what they would do. And so that's happened to be what we needed. And so, or what I needed, and the acupuncturist came, and my contractions still weren't shortening and getting into active labor. And so the acupuncturist came and she gave me some, I can't remember, it's black, I think it's black cohosh, homeopathic, and stuck some needles in my back. And it was like, it was intense. It was like immediately just gave me a contraction like right then as she stuck the needles in, and I went immediately into active labor. And from there, I think I was in that kind of active labor for like 6 hours, and here in my house. And I remember just kind of like just kind of curled up and just trying to brave the contractions. Like, it's wild because you hear people talk about it, but it's like, I've never heard anybody say it's just like an earthquake in your sacrum. Like, that's what it feels like. It's an earthquake in your sacrum. And it's what I love about all the ceremony that I'd ever done in my whole life, up in the, you know, like going to the longhouse and peeling roots until 4 a.m. after digging and being up since 6 a.m. and, you know, going to meetings or sweat or, you know, whatever type of ceremony. It's like, it really prepares you for that, because within all of that there's such an endurance, you know. And of course, hearing people's pregnant or birth stories, you know, it really prepares you for that endurance. And I never really considered myself, like, I felt like I always had a high pain tolerance, and just tapping in there, like tapping into that source of just knowing, like, you know, there's no turning around. And I always remember, I think Maria, Itsa's mom, talked about that, like you're in it, you know, like, I mean, I've heard that a lot, you know, there's no stopping it. You're going down the path of birthing this baby. And then, yeah, at one point, and Itsa could probably share more about this, because it's like, I'm so in my zone. Like, when I think back about my birth, like, I was just so present. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted to just remember it. I wanted to be so present and, like, to, like, be able to, like, really remember the moment of catching my baby and, like, all those things. But I was really present with myself, so it's funny when I hear stories of other people witnessing me. But Itsa was the rock. Like, I don't, you know, my mom was there, and just sort of that family witness, and the doula was supporting all the things that needed to happen, and Rhonda was just really, you know, pacing and making sure that, you know, everything's going in a good way. And I guess Rhonda had told Itsa, like, we got to get her walking. Like, it was just so intense, and that curl, that pain. And I remember she was like, go sit on the toilet. And I'd heard of this in other people's stories, and it's like that intense bearing down. Like, you just, you immediately want to push. So I sat on the toilet, and it was like immediate, like, oh my gosh. And it's just like this shift of like what your body's going to do now. It's like, there's a new job for you to do, and it's called pushing, and this is what you're gonna do. And it's, you know, it's like this other type of intensity to just get in rhythm with. And they had just got the birth tub all set up, and I remember that was, for me, it was like, that's a comfort measure. I didn't have this plan that Ayut was gonna be born in the water, but I knew, like, I was like ready for that kind of that comfort to come in. And so I remember getting in the tub, and it was really warm. Like, it felt like, oh, it was like in a hot tub. And then they were like, well, you shouldn't be this relaxed. I think we're gonna cool it down. So like, I got out, and they cooled it down. And then by the time I got back in, it felt like, okay, this is like, we're pushing. And just that, like, roaring of just pushing out this life. It's just such a different realm that you're in, of just like calling this baby into the world. And the birth tub that they had, it's like a horse trough that they put this really nice liner in. But I was so glad that it was like this hard thing, because that's like what I was just holding on to the side and just like rolling with every contraction and just pushing. And I remember this, you know, the contraction that pushed out his head. It was like, I just didn't know which contraction was going to be the one, but it was like, you know, just giving it all my strength and all my power. And then boom, his head popped out. and then I think Rhonda had just went to the restroom, and I think Itsa was in the room, and we had the birth tub in our small bedroom in the back, and I just had one, it was at night, and just had one candle lit, and just very in that like cave zone. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. And I was like, oh, what do I do? You know, it was just weird, like, okay, like, he's here, what next? And I remember Rhonda, like, you know, came in and was like, keep pushing. And I was like, okay, yeah, of course, keep pushing. And so the next contraction came, and we had already planned that we wanted Itsa to catch him. And so Itsa just like quickly derobes and jumps in the birth tub, and then he catches Ayut in the next contraction. And we I was like at the corner of the tub, and so he came out like this, and Itsa was behind me, and so there was like the cord, and we kind of had to like figure out how to get him out of the water. And Itsa has like a sweet story of just what that was like, you know, because he saw him first. And so we brought him up out of the water, and I held him, and it's a mental memory I'll have with me my whole life. And we didn't want to have pictures, just feeling like, you know, keep it sacred for us. And I just have that memory of just all three of us in the tub. And then I remember somebody was like, oh, is it a boy or girl? Because we chose not to know in pregnancy. And we had not, I don't know how long he was in our arms. And then we're like, oh, yeah, I don't know. And, you know, we saw he was a boy, and we had names, you know, picked out for who this person was going to be. And we were really wanting Ayut. And Ayut is, means bear root or osha in Ichaskin, and it's just a really important medicine to Itsa and I individually, and kind of us as a couple. And my aunt, who was advising me on what kind of names would be appropriate to name, you know, for a boy or girl, like she told us, you know, Ayut would be appropriate for a boy. And that was the one we kind of wanted, so it was just like, we just knew, you know, there's no discussion. That's just like, that's his name. and we knew we wanted to welcome him with the song, and so we, as soon as we saw he was this sweet little boy, we started singing the song that we had prepared for him, and just that had his name in there, and that was Ayut's first couple minutes in the world, and we stayed in the tub for a little bit, and then got on the bed right right next to the tub, and just holding my son, and he latched on really quick, and then I think we waited like a whole, I don't know, me, I think Ayut waited a whole hour for that placenta to be birthed too, and we chose, I think there was no blood left in that cord after we cut it. I think we waited that whole, like another hour. Just remember we were just sat there nursing, and it's just this amazing feeling of like, because I remember kind of like I couldn't eat, I could barely drink any water throughout the whole birthing process, and then it was like I was immediately like ready, like I felt there was like all this room for nourishment that I needed, and it's like this shift, and you're just like, I don't remember when I said it, but I just was like, that was worth it. Like, I could have 5 more of those. Like, we're not going to do that, but it was just like, oh my gosh, like, that is the best work I've ever done in my life, and the hardest work I've ever done in my life. And I'm going to pass it over to Itsa here in a second, and I can share a little bit maybe later about the just postpartum care, but I just remember feeling so proud of my body, and just so proud of us as a family, and just like, you look at life immediately different. Like, I looked at my mothers and all the people in my life that have birthed babies, and I'm like, that's what you were doing? This is what was happening? Like, oh my, like, let's talk a little bit, more in depth now. Like, it's just so wild how much we don't share, like there's so many times I went back to my friends about, like, oh, things are just different, or this, it was kind of like this, where I'm like, there's layers under that statement. There's layers under, like, just motherhood, things that you hear, parenthood things, and I've really gone back to people in my life and been like, I want to hear more, or oh my gosh, thank you for who you are and how much you've carried in this life being a parent. And I just have so much a different lens of reverence on our people that birth and parents.
For the birth itself, for me, I think my biggest part was, I really was trying to give as much support and power for that aspect of it all to Mariana, because I do feel that, at least with a lot of the birth workers that I know, and including my mother, like, that birth part is very much, a ceremony that's been held for mostly women for a long time. That being said, I do think that there's important space that men can participate in with birth, and I know some cultures have teachings about it. I was listening to an individual the other day, and can't remember their name off the top of my head. I just heard it one time, but I really liked it, and they were talking about how in their culture, when the woman becomes pregnant, the man becomes pregnant as well. And they talked about, some physiology, how, some men put on father weight and go through physical changes as well, and all these things in preparation for birth. And for me, though, the biggest part I took out of that teaching is more the spiritual preparedness that you're going into, as an individual, and just, making that conscious decision that you're going to be a part of this ceremony, you know, and preparing yourself to be in that ceremony. And then for me, of course, it was all about having permission from Mariana as well to be a part of that part of the ceremony, you know. The parenthood, I know I was going to be a parent, and I was going to, you know, I'll talk more about that after the birth story, but for that part, I wanted to make sure that Mariana felt really in control of the way the ceremony was going to go, and that she felt supported and had full control over how she could best allow this life to happen, which is I think really one of the best roles, because you know, now that I said that, I think about how much control we don't have in the birth too. You know, women is like so much surrendering involved in that too, and maybe that's why it feels good to have somebody give you as much support and as much control as they can. You know, so for me, that's kind of what I felt was like I wanted to support that, and then recognizing that my role was going to be to support in as much way that I could. It allowed me to I guess, you know, become pregnant too, if I'm going to use that terminology, and just become spiritually preparing to allow this child to come into the world. And what that looked like for me, I think a big part of it was educating myself more. Like I said, a lot of it was familiar because I'd been through ceremonies and stuff, but there's I think one of the easiest things to do is to you know, I guess two extremes of things that I could have gone. You know, I could have gone on one end and been like, I'm not going to worry about it at all. It's a natural process. I trust everything, and which is true. You know, it is a natural process, and it does happen. And I think that's a great teaching, and it's a great thing to have faith in the body and the process. And there is so much surrender to just faith in birth, that this is the way it happens. And then on the other hand, there's so much to it. You know, there's so much understanding that we can really go into about the body and the phases that a woman's going through, and all of the physical and spiritual ways that you can learn how to support, and preparing the home, and so much to learn about what you might need for postpartum care. What is postpartum care? You know, what kind of support do you need for after that? There's so many things you can learn about, and I really wanted to prepare myself and not think that I knew everything, and just learn as much as I could. And then also still being gentle with myself, because it's easy to get lost in that other end where you just feel completely unprepared, and you just have to read and study, and I feel like sometimes that can go on forever too, and at some point you have to not let worry, I guess, get the best of you, you know, because it's coming either way, and it's good to feel good, you know. So it's I guess another way I have heard it explained that I like is like simplicity. You want to reach simplicity, but on the other side of the mountain of complexity. You know, so that's one way I like to think about it. So I was trying to do that. When it came to the birth, a lot of it for me was also you know, trying to listen to Mariana and really just offer you know, a lot of love. I feel like in the teachings I've had, love is a huge part of childbirth, and just being open and really offering as much love and support, and just you know, open-heartedness as I could. I felt like as a lover and as a father in this situation, like my love for my family and for Mariana and my child was one of the most genuine things I could offer, and just being able to be there with that, and asking all the time, okay, how do you feel like I could support you, you know? And then also, I felt really blessed that we had, Rhonda and the rest of the team that Mariana chose, and we talked about together, just because it gave me so much more ability to just relax and just be able to offer that completely, and just felt really held and in good hands, to where sometimes when things were coming up that I didn't even realize that maybe I should be, more concerned or something, they would, take me aside and talk to me about certain things, and allow me to. They also allowed me a lot of space. I feel like they supported that, because Mariana really wanted me in a big way to be able to help through this process. And I would have been totally fine if she said, actually, your energy's not going to work for this, and I need you to not be here for the birth right now. I would have totally accepted that. But she felt like she really did want me by her side, and to help, catch sun, and as much as I could be a part of it, she felt that was helpful. And our midwife and team were so respectful for that choice that she'd made, and really finding space for me to come in and help with different things. I really loved that. One of the parts that I found I was able to really support in, as far as the birth process, beyond just the love part, was actually being a physically strong body, because it's a lot of physical work, and I also do body work. I'm a healthcare practitioner, do manual therapy, so massage mostly. Mostly a lot of injury rehabilitation is what I mostly do. So I just using a lot of that with Mariana when she was feeling sore, and like after being in early labor for days, just needing someone to hold her and support her. And I felt like Rhonda was really good about showing me different positions that I could just be something for her to hold on to, and stretch against, and walk around, and give some kind of relief, when she was having trouble sleeping through the night. And then for the actual birth itself, there was times when she, whether it was physically tired or just maybe emotionally scared sometimes, like the body just wanting to curl in, literally putting my body in between her arms and limbs, and letting her just hug around me to help, keep the body open when it needed to be. Literally, putting her on my feet and letting her just hold me, and walking around the house with her, if she needed to get the hips moving, and so certain things like that were places I found I was able to fit in, and really felt good for me too, to be able to have part and participate in that. It also felt good to have more help and be able to have time to rest, for myself. And then when Ayuk came, that was really cool. That was unexpected, She was hanging out in the tub. Rhonda was in the other room, and next thing you know, she just like I heard Mariana saying, he's coming now. His head's right here, and I looked in, and his head had already come out, and I was in the water. I looked down, and his head was just out, and he opened his eyes, and he looked at me, and which was really cool, because my mom said that's what I did when I was born, was that like my head came out, and I looked at my dad before I was born, and so when I saw that, I was like, whoa, he did it too, and that was cool. And I just took everything off, and I jumped in the tub, because we weren't expecting that to happen so easily and quickly. And I jumped in, and I heard Rhonda from the other room be like, wait for the next push. So we didn't, we just waited patiently. And then, the next push came, as they do, on their own. And he just came right out as soon as he came, and that was really cool, just having my arms, and he just came up out of the water, and he looked so peaceful, and he just just slightly came up out of the water, and I was looking at him, and as soon as he came out, I saw him take just a slight breath, and I was like, oh, maybe he'd be more comfortable under the water. And I just put him right back under the water, and that was a bad idea. You know, it was like, I could tell right away you know, I didn't realize that as soon as babies come out and breathe, they can no longer be underwater. But I found out really quick in like half a millisecond, and he was like, whoa, and I took him out, and he cried at me really good just for a second. And I said, I'm sorry, and I held him, and we found out how to get his cord out, you know, out from Mariana, and she got into the bed, and then I just passed him to her, and yeah, that was a really beautiful moment for us. Oh, we sang him a song as soon as he came out as well, before we even got into the bed. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share a little bit more about some of the aspects of our parenting journey since we've become parents. And Mariana asked me to share a little bit about some of the ceremonies and stuff that we did as well, because that's been a big part of our lives, you know. As I shared for myself, that was always been a big part of my life, and Mariana and I kind of also came together, you know, 11 years ago, kind of along those premises as well, just furthering that decolonization and reclaiming of our indigeneity, and learning all the ways of our ancestors and our people today as well, you know, as we exist today, and just furthering that for the wellness of our child, and wanting to have all of it. So like, you know, of course the birth was a ceremony, and from that, one of the most immediate ceremonies that we went into was the quarantine. Is a tradition that I don't know if anyone in my family ever directly talked about it. I know a lot of indigenous midwives from Texas area and everything, and families have teachings about it, of, you know, you stay home and don't see anybody for 40 days. I wasn't able to be there the whole 40 days. I had just like begun a job, and, you know, maybe I could have prioritized it more, but I felt like I really needed this job to be able to support my family and keep the house that we just gotten and things like that. And it's the world we live in. Not everyone can always do that. But looking back on it, it's one of the things I wish I had advocated for more, you know, is to be able to have that whole time, because man, that time is just so important. It really is. And but yeah, just being able to be together as a family and bond during that time. Part of the things we did during that time was build the sweat lodge. You know, myself, part of the birth story that my parents had always told me about my birth ceremony that really stuck with me was that I was able to go into sweat when I was a few hours old, you know, and that didn't fit completely for us, because when we really started thinking about it, you know, one of the reasons why was because my parents opened up my birth ceremony to like the whole community. There was so many people there, and I think part of it was my mom was like starting to feel like, actually, I don't want all these people here. Go build a fire, get the sweat ready, you know, and got them all chased out the door. So like, you know, we didn't want to put that extra burden on our birth team. We didn't want that many people here, and we didn't want to put the extra burden on the people we did have here to have to try to build a sweat lodge and put rocks together and everything for our son. So, but we did want him to be able to have that as part of his story, and because it is something that I grew up with and is a part of my way of life. And so we built it, and we got him in there within a week. And you know, of course, it's not something I would just recommend for everybody, but for us it was very important. We have teachings about how you do that for really young babies, and they're really comfortable in there. You know, if you keep it really mellow and gentle, it's kind of like you know, they just came out of a really warm, dark comfortable place like that. And it was true, you know, it was really mellow. It was really special for us to do that. Another part of the teachings that my family has done is planting of the placenta. I know other indigenous people do this in the Philippines and probably other parts of the world as well. And for me, that was always also a very important part for my story. And I know where my placenta was buried, and I feel very connected to that place. You know, when I think back on it and the people there that my family was connected to, you know, it kind of ties me to them as family, and to that land where it's planted. So we were very intentional about where we wanted to plant his placenta, and we put it in a very special place that was, you know, ceremonially significant for us. We also went and did, you know, a teepee ceremony. It's a ceremony that's carried from my family on my mom's side, as well as, you know, my second father on that side, and my brother carries that fireplace now too, and you know, it's all on that side of the family. You know, that's kind of one of the ways we pray, and it's one of the ways we had. It's basically a ceremony where you sit up all night and you pray as a community for different things that you might need support with, and your wants and things in life, and also to show that you're sincere about it. And you know, there's sacrifice and involved with a lot of ceremony. And so we did some of that, you know, as just a way to say thank you, because we had prayed about it and wanting to be able to get a home and have a baby and bring a child into this world in a good way. And so we felt it was appropriate to go back to the community and be able to say thank you, you know, and to say a prayer for this life now that it was here with us, and pray for guidance for the next step on, you know, how to continue as being parents and how to try to do that in the best way. And then all the other ways we've just been trying to bring him around as many of those cultural ceremonies as we can, as well as with Mariana's people, the Yakama on that side with the longhouse, and she's, you know, a food gatherer over there. So we've been trying to bring him over to the first foods feasts and the releasings to, you know, to gather, and we've been taking him up into the mountains to eat wianu, and did you want to add any more of those? Any more to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about one of our feasts from our longhouse, the root feast. They also do a baby's first food ceremony, and so all the new babies try our new foods, all of our Indian foods for the first time. And he was only about 3.5 months, so we just kind of like dipped our finger in the food and rubbed it on his gums. And I guess just naming, you know, that how important it felt to make that big effort to just introduce him to these spiritual places, to these the lineage that he comes from. You know, when we go to the longhouse, like, he's related to most of those people there, so it's also this, you know, bringing that connection for him at a young age, and introducing him to one of his spiritual homes, one of his communities, and just as somebody, like, personally, I'm really passionate about our traditional foods and medicines, and that's part of the work that I do in this world. And one of his first foods, like, that he actually, you know, really we offered him to actually eat was some elk that was hunted by my uncle. As we were kind of preparing our food for our freezer and for this time, our uncle or my uncle gave us some elk that he hunted, and so that was Ayut's first food was elk. And then after that was just trying to introduce as many native foods as possible, and still, even in my pregnancy, learning that, the baby's palate, is shaped, even with what you're eating when you're pregnant, and of course what you're eating when you're breastfeeding. And so really trying to infuse that in, and really connect him to these lands and to his ancestors through our foods. And also I wanted to just name, that when we went and did the ceremony for him, to just give thanks in the teepee meeting, we did that back in Colorado, and that was, there was so much in that first year of life that we're really grateful that we got to do, because we wanted to bring him to not only meet a lot of his family from Itsa's family, which is our family, but introduce him to those lands. This is, here's where he's born. He's born here. And really, our Tagnapum ancestors are not that far. They roam these lands too. And also, to really connect him. What does it mean to be this child that carries lots of ancestors and comes from, these different places, and wanting to start his life that way, of just introducing him to these lands and foods and relatives, and just praying that just builds upon that healthy foundation for him. And one thing, I used to work with a lot of Native youth in the previous work that I did, and one of the things we used to talk about, part of the work that we were promoting was to promote wellness in our communities, and really trying to work with young people, because that's because of all the reasons why you want to work with young people, to instill all those healthy habits and practices and culture at a young age. And there was this really beautiful graphic that we would share, that was the ultimate, was showing that how many of our communities and generations really have been dying, being born into trauma and dying in trauma, and that cycle just keeps continuing. And how, for us, want to first learned about that and saw that, I always thought, this is my work. I want to bring a child into wellness. I want to bring wellness into the world. And really that's been, such a big, beautiful part of this path, is just how do we create that healthy, well foundation for a child. And I know that my parents and Itsa's parents, there's so much love and work and sacrifice they put into our lives, and there's so much that we've learned, but there's so much more that we want to give Ayut, and there's so much more that they gave us that allows us to be in this position that our parents didn't have. And so just to continue that cycle, to just keep putting our babies into wellness, and having that be the norm, that there's just generations of these babies that are being born into well, healthy families, and for that to be the norm for him, is our ultimate goal. And how do we practice and live that every day?
Okay, so I was just talking about, I guess after the birth, the immediate postpartum, and we were really lucky to have Mariana's mom there immediately, and of course Rhonda and our doula were rock stars, and just cooked us food and allowed us both just completely rest with Ayut, and just be together as a family, which was amazing. And then my mother showed up a few days later. She of course wanted to be there for the birth, but she knew that babies come on their own time, and she figured that the most important part that she would really be able to support us, knowing that we were in good hands, would be in a lot of the postpartum. And so she got her ticket more towards the later part of our expected due date, and and came just a few days after Ayut was born, and continued to offer kind of some of the same support as far as just cleaning up the house every day, cooking meals, and really allowing us to just rest and just be with each other as much as we wanted. And of course, I had some projects I was wanting to do around the house because we were nesting, and we just moved into this place, and there was a lot of kind of immediate repair work that needed to be done. So I did some of that as well. You want to go down? Yeah, I'll let you.
So, yeah, all of what Itsa said. I mean, they call it like the golden hour after the baby's born. I just remember like just that magic of being able to just be with my baby and then be cared for. Having this whole circle of loved ones just care for us as this brand new family. And I remember the next morning, Ayut was born at night, and the next morning, my mom, of course, stayed the night, and she made us Swedish pancakes, which is like my comfort food. And I remember just being in bed, and like she's walking in with Swedish pancakes, and Rhonda and Kara coming in to like check on us, and I remember Rhonda being like, "This is exactly where you should be. This is exactly what I want to see. You're still in bed, you know, like this is where you should be for several days." And I remember her also like being like, "Itsa, this is your job, like, you know, checking my temperature and different vitals, you know, for me, and you know, so that both of us can focus on, you know, watching, you know, Ayut and just I just have such good memories of just living in, like, it felt like I was living in my bedroom for the first few days of his life, and then just everything was going on outside of, you know, like the clockwork of what brings a house together was still happening, like laundry and food was being made and water was being brought to me, and it just like I just felt like this queen, just this birth queen, just being able to be so present with my child. And I felt like so grateful, like, to just be in my home. And you know, we just got into this home a couple months before, like Itsa shared, and to just be like, this is where we are, you know, we don't need to go anywhere. We moved all the appointments, like the first checkup with the doctor, a pediatrician, and I had like a WIC checkup. It was just like, we're moving that all back, you know, like we're just gonna be home as much as we can. Yeah, after a couple days, my mom left, and Itsa's mom came, and she was here for 2 weeks. And I chose, you know, after hearing more ways of how pregnant people, you know, care for themselves in that postpartum time, to take those 40 days postpartum to stay home with me and my baby. Itsa had 2 weeks off, and he was home with us, and it just felt so important to just, you know, it was winter. We had a big epic snowstorm like a couple weeks after he was born that really also helped us to just stay in. But we just stayed here and just cared for each other. I took 3 months off of work too, and just learned how to be a mom, and I'm still on that journey. Ayut is 1 year and 4 months old, and Mother's Day, whenever this views, Mother's Day in my time right now was yesterday, and it's just beautiful to reflect on just like how much I learn and have learned from all the mothers and grandmas and aunties in my life. You know, like I keep looking ahead. You know, I have a friend that's lives close by, and her son's 7 months older, and I'm always just like, so that's what's going on when he's, you know, 7 months in the future when Ayut grows to that age. And or my friends that have kids that are almost 6th graders. Like I just really value that circle of care, and really value all the people that I've met, like people at that Indigenous birth keepers gathering. There was 2 people that were like, you can't control your birth. Like, you can pray, you can bring all the things in, but like your birth will be your birth, and there's just only so much that you can control about what happens at your birth. But what you can control is the type of care you're gonna get in your postpartum, and like think about it, like, you know, call that in. And like right before we had him, we had a housewarming, and we asked people to bring us freezer meals, and then we did like a meal train, and of course we had his mom here, and like we bought an instant pot. Like we really tried to think about like when he goes back to work and it's just me and Ayute, like what do we do? How do I care for myself in this baby? And I'm so grateful for all of that advice. You know, I was just listening to another podcast of a family sharing, and it's like, you know, we need that advice. We need our friends and family to share with us those good things, and to, you know, put off to the side the like really judgmental advice that could be really harmful. But like, you know, this is the time where we need each other. We need our families. And I'm so grateful for all the things that I got that really helped me to prepare for where I'm at now. And there's another thing that I thought was so funny. I was like talking with Rhonda about like whether to get a crib, or, you know, like, because we bed share, we all sleep in the same bed, and we had a queen size bed that we had just bought like a year before, and that was like one of our biggest investments. So it was just like, oh my gosh, we're getting a brand new bed. And then we were trying to decide if we wanted to get a king size bed, and whether to get a crib, and why would we need a crib if we're gonna, you know. And I remember just like Rhonda was so much of just a thought partner, like just a deep listener through my whole journey. And I remember her being like, well, you know, maybe you don't get a crib and you're just getting a freezer and a king size bed, and that's what you need for, you know, like babies don't need much. And I was like, still makes me laugh, because I'm like, you know what, like, yeah, like we got, you know, amazing amount of hand-me-down clothes and odds and ends, and you got your other few little doodads, and I'm so glad we got a king size bed and freezer because it kept us fed. And, you know, we were all still right there in that bed. And you know, I think the other things I wanted to share just about like postpartum, this parenting journey, is how grateful it is just to hear, like, again, like stories, like it's medicine just to share our story. It was, you know, like right after he was born, it was like we were so excited to like, this is what happened, this is his birth story that just happened. And then it feels like the older he got, like the less it's like, this is our birth story, ready to hear it, you know, like there's less of an audience. But it's so medicinal to just let out and share these stories. And I was so hungry for them. I was so hungry for like any Black, Indigenous, people of color birth stories. Of course, you know, really interested in Indigenous birth stories. And I'm so happy to already have heard, you know, people that have shared on this podcast. And you know, just there's just the stories that happen between your friends. Like I remember one of my friends, who was one of my closest friends, that was kind of the first friend in our group to become a mother. And I remember her talking about her breastfeeding journey, and just the different interactions, you know, the family that were like, you know, he's older than 6 months, why are you still doing it? And what, he's over a year, why are, you know, like, and realizing like the different challenges and the different needs of support that our communities really need, and our parents and mothers and birthing people really need. And I'm so grateful, because all of those things have lifted me up to where I am now. Like I think so much about, you know, like what I've been able to reclaim and remember or ask for in terms of like my own culture and teachings. It is all for this child. Like it is one of the most biggest gifts. There's so many gifts that come with having a child, but they just so deeply encourage you to just be your best self. And for me, within that is giving him the most amount of teachings from our people, you know, from Itsa's people and my people, as we possibly can. And I know that, you know, we both come from parents that sacrificed a lot for us and for what we have. And we're also, our generation is at this different time where I'm seeing that beauty of a lot of my peers, of just people giving their kids native names as their first names, and you know, raising them in ceremony and raising them with all of these things that was not accessible for you know, my parents' generation. And so I'm just grateful for the shoulders that we stand on, and the people that have been doing that work to bring these things back, to make it comfortable, like more comfortable and safe for me to breastfeed in public, or you know, more, you know, that there's other people out there that are birthing their babies, other Indigenous people birthing their babies at home right now, and that this can be that normal that we can bring back to our communities for people that want it. You know, I think everybody has their own journey, and that's this is just our journey and what we wanted for our family, and just to bring our culture and bring our ceremony and live it. You know, there's the last thing I wanted to share about that was a couple months ago, one of our language teachers started offering for the first time classes online, and I'm totally behind on it, but I started taking them. And you know, even before those classes, Itsa and I were speaking the most of our languages that we've ever had in our home. Before you know, as soon as Ayuk got here, we were just sharing all the words that we knew in Nahuatl and in Chisquin, because we wanted Ayuk to have that normalized. And so maybe he, you know, we say head, but then we say Nishnu. And maybe we say Achash, and then we still say hand. And it's like, we're just sharing what we got right now. And it's building, but that's, you know, I have to keep thinking about, you know, what the platform and the foundation that we're building for him, and that it's just a foundation, and he can go further. And that's the goal, is that we just do our best. And it's like all those cliches you hear in parenthood, like they're, you know, they're just true, you know, like you just do your best, and you just figure it out. And, you know, you call on your community and your circle of care and your ancestors, and just do your best. I think Itsa wanted to share a little bit.
I promise I'm done.
Okay, I just wanted to share one last little teaching too, from parenting for me, kind of where I've been at now. There's one teaching that from my family that I wanted to share, that I feel like is really nice, that I've been trying to hold on to, and has been really helpful. And that's kind of the idea that our children don't belong to us. You know, that's something I'd always hear my parents say. They'd be like, I just want you to wish the best for you, you know, because you don't belong to me. You just, you know, you belong to the world, and you belong to the earth. And for me, that was really helpful, you know, just to as guiding now as like becoming into a parenting role, to just helps me understand better kind of my role as a parent, you know, as I don't think of my child as, you know, my property, or something like that. For me, I kind of see parenting more as like a caretaking, you know, as a, it's really about just caring for a human being. And I'm going to refer back to, you know, my profession as a healthcare provider, because that's one of the best ways I can think about how I, you know, care for people in everyday life. And I think a lot of people have a relationship as well with the healthcare providers, where sometimes you want the healthcare to be the professional, and you just, you know, give your health over to this person, and you say, tell me what I need, you know. And for me, for my patients, it's like you know, I really try to turn it around and give as much power back to them, and be like, you know, I'm just here to assist and care, and how do you think I can help you, and what are you feeling, and really try to let them be the primary care provider for themselves, and be an assistance, and just provide really genuine interest in them being well, and not assume that I know everything, and always ask questions. And I try to take the same approach with my child, except in a different way, because it's like I don't want to just be like, you're your primary care provider, because he can't take care of himself. You know. So I do have to kind of that's was one thing that I had to shift for myself, and be like, okay, I have to care for him, but in a way to where it's like, I'm just watching over and trying to help you develop into best person you're meant to be, you know, and not try to have too much control over what that is going to look like, and just having faith in it, you know, introducing him to who he's always been, like who all of his ancestors have been, so he knows where he comes from, and what he has to work with, you know, and be proud of that, and then who his community is, who's there that can support him, and allow him to become who he's going to become, you know, and just kind of caretake him until he is able to take care of himself. So that's kind of one of the ways I've been looking at it. And then I think the last thing too that I wanted to share was just some of the unexpecteds. You know, like again, like from the healthcare provider, it's being real comfortable not knowing. You know, like with patients that come in, sometimes when they're wanting to give their power away, they're like, well, what's you're the professional, what do you think? You know, and lots of times it's really helpful to be like, well, you know, some things of what I think about, but really oftentimes it's a lot more powerful to just admit, you know, like, I don't have answers, I don't really know, what do you think about it, and exploring things. And for me, that's been kind of fatherhood, you know, is trying to get really comfortable and just being open, you know, and understanding when things come up, like, oh, breastfeeding, well, what do you think about that? Well, I have some opinions, you know, thoughts. I was breastfed, but let's see what other people think. Let's get some others' ideas. Let's be open, you know, and really just explore, and just being, you know, trying to really be honest, you know, with ourselves, and what's really going to be best, you know. So yeah, so share that. Fatherhood has also been very unexpectedly fulfilling in a way that I wasn't really expecting. You know, it just there's just this feeling of completeness, I guess, is what I was talking to Mariana about the other day, and which was strange, because it's not like I felt incomplete before I was a father, but I guess it's kind of like it's kind of bigger than me. I feel like, you know, just thinking about the way everything ties into community. I think there's a sense of maybe missing I was feeling from being away from my own family too, and not having those tight, close relationships in the way we had with everybody. And then just thinking about how much we all need each other, you know, like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of people don't have birth as ceremony, and this part of life, which is so important as a part of their reality, you know. It's kind of separated in a lot of ways, and just seeing, you know, the connection with Ayut, with his grandparents, and just knowing that they feel so much more complete, you know, having a grandchild in their life to care for, and I feel like it's made our relationship feel more complete, and I'm hanging out with them, and so, like, there's just like this whole greater completeness, you know, to myself, and my family, and the extended family, and the community, and that feels really good, you know. It's a blessing I wasn't really expecting. And then I was looking at it yesterday. And yeah, that's here, and it feels really good. So yeah, just share that much, and thank you. And I think I'll see if family wants to come. We'll say thank you together. Did I interrupt your meal? I'm sorry. Is there anything else you wanted to share? We're good. Okay. All right. Well then, thank you very much for inviting us. Asking us to speak on your podcast, Rhonda, and thank you for all the listeners. Hope you find this helpful, and we love you guys.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, Yahweh ha Yahweh Yahweh we Yahweh Ela Yahweh ha Yahweh we ha Yahweh ha Yahweh ha Yahweh we ha Yahweh Yahweh we ha Yahweh ha Yahweh ha Yahweh Yahweh we Yahweh we ha Yahweh 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 we ha Yahweh ha Yahweh ha Yahweh we ha Yahweh Yahweh we ha Yahweh ha Yahweh